Welcome back, everybody. Today, we're going to be diving deep into a topic that really challenges how we think about buildings and how we use them.
Ooh, interesting.
We're going to be exploring this concept called sufficiency in the EU building sector.
Okay.
It's about maximizing the use of existing buildings before we even think about constructing anything new.
So making the most of what we already have.
Yeah, exactly. And we've got some great material to dig into for this deep dive.
Right.
We've got excerpts from this recent EU report. It's called Sufficiency in the Building Sector for the EU Whole Life Carbon Roadmap.
Okay.
And we're also going to be looking at 5 fascinating case studies from across Europe.
Looking forward to that.
So stick with us to see how this could really be a game changer.
Yeah.
Whether you're passionate about sustainable building or just curious about how we can create a more resource-efficient future, I think you'll find this really interesting.
I think what's really fascinating here is how this idea of sufficiency really pushes us to rethink our assumptions about progress and consumption.
You're right. It's like it makes you stop and think, especially when we're talking about something as fundamental as housing.
Yeah, exactly.
Because when we talk about sufficiency in this context, it's not just about, making our buildings a bit greener with energy-efficient upgrades or solar panels. We're talking about a fundamental shift in perspective here.
Absolutely. And the report really highlights this point.
Yeah.
It highlights that, new construction is rapidly becoming a major source of emissions.
And when we consider the sheer number of under-occupied buildings in the EU, it's like...
It's huge.
Yeah.
The report states it's a staggering 38%.
Wow, 38%. I had no idea it was that high.
Yeah.
So if we're not building new, then what exactly does sufficiency look like in action?
Well, the report explores a bunch of different possibilities.
Okay.
It really pushes this idea of converting vacant offices into homes.
Interesting.
Which, feels especially relevant now given the rise of remote work.
Right.
It also talks about repurposing vacant properties in general, adding additional floors to existing buildings, and even converting single-family homes into multi-unit dwellings.
I see. So it's all about maximizing what we already have.
Yeah, instead of just, always expanding outwards.
Right, but wouldn't that be incredibly disruptive? I can imagine there would be pushback from people who see, housing as a private matter.
Yeah, that's a really great point. And the report does acknowledge those concerns.
Okay.
But what's interesting is that there's actually strong public support for these sufficiency measures.
Really?
Yeah. There was this one study that compared citizen recommendations with government plans.
Hold on. Citizen recommendations. You'll have to break that down for me.
Sure. So citizen assemblies are basically groups of randomly selected citizens who come together to deliberate on policy issues.
I see.
They're gaining traction as a way to get a pulse on public opinion,
Yeah, that makes sense.
And in this particular study, citizens consistently favored a far greater number of sufficiency measures than what governments were actually implementing.
Wow, so there's a disconnect there.
Yeah, there is a big one. The report says it was 3 to 6 times higher.
3 to 6 times. That's huge. So people are really on board with this.
It seems so.
Does the report say anything specific about the types of measures people are keen on?
Yeah, there was a strong emphasis on regulations for new construction. Things like tighter restrictions on building permits if there are vacant buildings nearby.
Okay.
Stricter planning rules to protect greenfield sites.
Right.
Even requiring an assessment of a building's potential for reuse before demolition.
So it sounds like people are saying, let's think twice, even 3 times before we build new.
Yeah, exactly. And that makes a lot of sense.
It does, but I'm also curious about the practical side of things.
Yeah.
Is all of this just theoretical, or are there actual examples of sufficiency working in the real world?
Well, that's where the 5 case studies come in.
Perfect.
They offer a glimpse into how sufficiency is being implemented across Europe.
Okay.
And I think you'll find them quite impressive.
Well, I'm always up for a virtual adventure.
Great.
So, light the way. Where's our first stop?
Well, first we're heading to Belgium.
Okay.
To check out this intergenerational home sharing program called One Toit Two Ages.
Wait, seniors sharing their homes with students?
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
How does that tie into the idea of sufficiency?
Well, it's a brilliant example of utilizing what they call invisible space.
Invisible space.
Yeah, it's the term for underutilized space within existing homes and apartments.
Okay, I see.
So the program effectively creates new housing units without any new construction.
Right, by using space that's already there.
Exactly. And it addresses affordability for students and combats loneliness for seniors.
So it sounds like a win-win situation.
It really is.
But is it actually making a dent in the overall housing situation?
Well, they facilitated over 5,220 matches since 2009.
Wow.
So you can imagine the amount of construction and, more importantly, embodied carbon that's been avoided through this initiative.
That's pretty impressive. Okay, so I'm sold on the heartwarming factor, but I'd love to see how this works on a larger scale.
Okay, well, let's hop over to France then.
France.
Yeah, they've implemented a national plan to combat vacant housing.
A national strategy specifically for vacant housing.
Yeah, and they use data as a key tool.
Data. Okay, how does that work in practice?
Well, they've developed this national database to track vacant properties.
Interesting.
And this allows local authorities to identify and reactivate these spaces strategically.
I see.
And get this, the data has revealed that over 1.1 million buildings across France are long-term vacant.
Over 1 million buildings just sitting there. That's wild.
It is a significant portion of their building stock.
So what are they doing to tackle that?
Well, they're doing a few things.
Okay.
Promoting the conversion of vacant offices into residential units.
Okay.
Encouraging the use of empty spaces for social purposes.
Mm-hmm.
And even using the data to implement proactive vacancy prevention strategies.
Vacancy prevention. That sounds intriguing.
It's basically about identifying buildings that are at risk of becoming vacant and intervening early.
So trying to stop it before it even happens.
Exactly. It's like a proactive approach to addressing the root causes of vacancy.
Like preventative health care for buildings.
Exactly.
Okay, so where to next on our European sufficiency journey?
Let's head to Germany.
Germany.
They have a program called Turn Old into Two or More.
Turn old into two or more. I like it. Get straight to the point.
Yeah, it does.
So what's this program all about?
It's all about encouraging homeowners to convert their single-family houses into multi-unit dwellings.
Okay.
And to incentivize this, they offer a consultancy bonus to help cover the initial costs of exploring this option.
Interesting. So they're providing financial support to make it easier for homeowners to create more housing units within their existing properties?
That's exactly right.
Smart. Has the program been successful so far?
Well, they initially launched it as a pilot in 4 communities.
Okay.
And the response has been really positive. They had 77 homeowners express interest, and 16 of them were already taking concrete steps toward converting their homes.
That's great. So even with something as seemingly personal as your own home, people are open to change when presented with the right information and support.
It seems so.
I'm starting to see a pattern here.
Yeah.
All of these initiatives are about finding creative ways to maximize the use of existing space.
Yeah.
And it's about shifting our mindset from bigger is better to smarter is better.
I like that.
Okay. I'm eager to see what other approaches are out there.
Well, then our next stop takes us to Ireland,
Ireland. Okay.
where a project called Park West Dublin 12, the Plaza, showcases what's possible when we reimagine vacant office buildings.
Another office conversion.
Yeah.
I guess the rise of remote work is having a significant impact on the way we think about these spaces.
It really is.
Tell me more about this particular project.
Well, this project transformed 2 long vacant office blocks into 86 social housing units,
Wow.
providing homes for over 200 people.
That's amazing.
And they didn't stop there. They took a really thoughtful approach to sustainability.
Okay.
They expanded the buildings, added a penthouse floor, installed modern heating and ventilation systems powered by solar panels,
Nice.
and even incorporated elements of the original structure to reduce the overall environmental footprint.
Wow. It's amazing how they've taken these outdated, energy-guzzling office buildings and turned them into something not only useful, but also environmentally sound and socially beneficial.
It's a great example of how sufficiency can go beyond just minimizing carbon emissions.
Right.
It's about creating a more holistic approach to development, addressing social needs, and improving quality of life.
While minimizing our environmental impact.
Exactly.
Okay, so I'm ready for our last stop. Where are we headed now?
Our final destination is Poland.
Poland.
Okay. Habitat for Humanity Poland has developed a program called Adaptation of Empty Spaces for Affordable Apartments.
Affordable housing is a pressing issue everywhere these days.
It really is.
I'm very curious to see how they're tackling it with this program.
Well, they're taking a 2-pronged approach.
Okay.
First, they've created a national database to track vacant properties.
Similar to what we saw in France.
Exactly. And this data revealed that a surprising 12% of all residential units in Poland are vacant.
Wow, that's a huge number.
That's over 1.5 million units.
Over 1.5 million units just sitting empty while people are struggling to find affordable housing.
It's a real problem.
What's the second part of their strategy?
Well, they've created a toolkit to guide local organizations in converting these vacant spaces into social housing.
Okay.
This toolkit covers everything from legal options and financial support mechanisms to technical recommendations.
It sounds like they're not just identifying the problem, they're actually empowering others to implement the solutions.
Exactly. That's a really smart approach.
Yeah, it's clear from these examples that sufficiency is more than just a concept. It's being put into practice in some really inspiring ways.
It is. And what's even more exciting is that we can actually start to quantify the impact of these initiatives.
Okay.
The EU report goes into some fascinating calculations based on these case studies.
I love numbers.
They estimated the amount of floor area we could avoid building if these sufficiency measures were implemented more broadly.
Okay, let's hear it. What kind of numbers are we talking about?
Well, for the intergenerational home sharing program in Belgium, upscaling, that could avoid somewhere between 19,221 and 26,813 square meters of new construction.
That's a lot, especially for a program that's essentially, using existing space more effectively.
Right.
What about the national plan in France? What kind of numbers are they looking at?
Their estimates are even more impressive.
Okay.
The plan to combat vacant housing could potentially avoid a whopping 10,772,140 to 20,197,763 square meters of new construction.
Hold, let me do some quick math here.
Yeah.
We're talking about millions of square meters.
Millions.
Does the report give any context for those figures? Like what percentage of total construction do they represent?
Yeah. They actually compare those figures to annual construction rates.
Okay.
And it's pretty striking.
Okay.
The lower estimate for France suggests that their plan could effectively offset an entire year's worth of residential construction.
An entire year.
An entire year.
That's incredible. So just by making better use of existing buildings, they could theoretically eliminate the need for a whole year of new residential construction.
That's right. And the higher estimates for some countries like Germany suggest the potential to offset multiple years of new construction.
Wow, multiple years. That's mind-blowing.
It is. It really makes you think about the potential here.
We're not just talking about incremental change here. This is about fundamentally shifting how we approach urban development.
Yeah, absolutely.
But while the potential benefits are clear, are there any potential downsides to focusing so heavily on sufficiency?
That's a really important question. And while sufficiency offers, a lot of benefits, it's not a silver bullet.
Right.
The report highlights several challenges that need to be addressed.
Okay, let's dive into those. What are some of the potential pitfalls we need to be aware of?
Well, one major challenge is the need for greater capacity within public administrations.
Okay.
We need dedicated teams with the expertise and resources to develop and implement effective sufficiency policies.
It sounds like we need people who understand both the big picture, the environmental and social goals,
Right.
and the nuts and bolts of how to actually make these policies work in the real world.
Exactly. And it's not just about government action either.
Okay.
Existing tax systems and rent price mechanisms can actually disincentivize the efficient use of space.
Wait, how so? How could our current systems be working against sufficiency?
Well, think about it. Inheritance taxes, property sales taxes, even stamp duties can make it financially challenging for people to downsize or repurpose underutilized properties.
I see what you mean. If you're facing a hefty tax bill every time you sell or inherit a property, that's going to discourage people from making changes.
Right. Even if those changes would be more sustainable in the long run. And then on the tenant side, rent increases are often tied to new contracts.
Okay.
So someone who wants to move to a smaller, more efficient space might end up paying more in rent.
Which defeats the purpose entirely.
Exactly.
So we have these systemic barriers that need to be addressed if we want sufficiency to really take off.
Yeah, it's not just about changing mindsets. It's about creating a financial and regulatory environment that supports these new ways of living.
Makes sense. Are there any other challenges we need to consider?
The report also acknowledges the upfront investment costs associated with adapting buildings for new uses.
Yeah, renovations can be expensive.
They can be. And while the long-term benefits might outweigh the initial costs, that upfront investment can be a major hurdle.
Of course, it's a hurdle for many sustainability initiatives.
Right.
Is the report optimistic about finding ways to overcome that financial barrier?
They highlight the need for innovative financial mechanisms like grants, subsidies, or even new financing models to make these upfront costs more manageable.
So basically finding ways to make it easier for people to make the sustainable choice.
Exactly.
Any other challenges that stand out from the report?
Another key point is the need for context-specific solutions.
Okay.
What works in a dense urban environment might not be suitable for a rural community.
Right. Different strokes for different folks.
Exactly. And even within a single community, we need tailored approaches.
Based on, building type, ownership structure, the specific needs of residents.
All of that.
That brings up the question of unintended consequences.
Yeah.
Could a push for sufficiency, even with good intentions, end up backfiring in some situations?
It's possible.
For instance, could encouraging people to live in smaller spaces lead to overcrowding or make housing even less affordable in certain areas?
Those are excellent points. We need to be mindful of potential downsides.
Right.
The report emphasizes the need for careful planning and a deep understanding of local contexts.
To make sure that these policies are actually beneficial.
Exactly. We don't want to inadvertently exacerbate existing problems.
So it's about finding that balance, promoting efficient use of space without compromising quality of life or affordability.
Absolutely.
Okay. And are there any other challenges you wanted to touch on?
The last one I wanted to mention is that the report really underscores the importance of more research, better data, and standardized definitions when it comes to sufficiency.
That makes sense. If we're going to make informed decisions about something as complex as housing and urban development, we need a solid foundation of knowledge.
Exactly. We need more research to really understand the impacts of these sufficiency measures.
Okay.
Tools to track progress and common language to facilitate communication and collaboration.
Across different sectors and regions.
Exactly.
It sounds like we're really in the early stages of exploring the potential of sufficiency.
We are. There's still a lot to learn and discover.
But despite the challenges, I'm still feeling optimistic.
Me too.
The case studies we discussed earlier show that it's already making a real difference in communities across Europe.
Yeah, and in very diverse ways.
So what are some of the key takeaways you think our listeners should glean from these examples?
I think one of the most important takeaways is the sheer diversity of approaches. Sufficiency isn't a one-size-fits-all solution.
Okay.
There's room for experimentation and innovation to find what works best in different contexts.
That's exciting.
It is.
It means we can adapt these ideas to our own communities and leverage local knowledge and expertise.
Exactly.
What else stands out from the case studies?
They also highlight the importance of aligning sufficiency with other policy objectives.
Okay.
These initiatives often have multiple benefits.
Right.
Addressing things like affordable housing, community development, revitalizing urban areas.
It's about seeing the bigger picture.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Sufficiency isn't just about sustainability in isolation. It's about integrating sustainability into a broader vision.
For thriving communities.
Yes, and this multifaceted approach makes it more appealing.
For policymakers and the public alike. Exactly.
People are more likely to get on board when they see tangible benefits beyond just reducing carbon emissions.
Right. It's about connecting with people's values and aspirations. Speaking of getting people on board, the case studies also emphasize the importance of information and awareness building.
That's key.
Yeah.
People need to understand what sufficiency is, why it matters, how they can get involved.
And how it relates to them personally.
Yeah, we need to go beyond technical jargon and make this concept accessible and relatable.
Right.
Using interactive tools, workshops, community events to spark curiosity and empower action.
It's about shifting from sufficiency as a policy to sufficiency as a movement.
I love that.
A cultural shift where people see this not as a sacrifice, but as an opportunity to create a better future.
Precisely. And the case studies also demonstrate the power of collaboration. We saw how governments, nonprofits, and communities are working together to develop and implement these initiatives.
It's not just about top-down policies. It's about creating partnerships and a sense of shared ownership.
Exactly. When people feel like they have a voice in shaping their communities, that's when the most creative and sustainable solutions emerge.
I completely agree. And what's particularly exciting is that the report hints at the incredible potential of vacant and underutilized public buildings.
Ooh, interesting.
What kind of buildings are we talking about?
Schools, libraries, government offices.
Okay.
Buildings that often have, unique architectural features and historical significance.
Right.
They could be transformed into vibrant community hubs.
Okay.
Providing a mix of housing, cultural spaces, social services.
It's like giving those forgotten spaces a new life and a new purpose.
Exactly.
How would that tie into the bigger picture of sufficiency?
Well, it's a perfect example of how sufficiency can go beyond just meeting basic needs. It's about creating spaces that foster connection, creativity, and a sense of belonging.
So a more holistic approach to urban development.
Exactly, where sustainability, social well-being, and cultural vibrancy are all intertwined.
It's a powerful vision, and it makes me wonder, how could this idea of transforming public buildings apply to our listeners' own community?
That's a great question to ponder.
Yeah. Think about the places you see every day, the buildings that might be underutilized or even sitting empty.
What hidden potential is lurking within those spaces?
Right. What needs could we meet? What opportunities could we unlock? What would our communities look like if we prioritize making the most of what we already have? It's a challenge that encourages us to think beyond the obvious and imagine new possibilities for the places we live and work. And as we wrap up this deep dive, I think that's a perfect note to end on. What key takeaways do you hope our listener will walk away with today?
I say the most important takeaway is that sufficiency isn't some radical or far-fetched idea. It's a practical and common-sense approach to building a more sustainable and equitable future. And it's about so much more than just the environment. It's about creating communities that are more livable, more resilient, and more connected.
I completely agree. And as we saw in the case studies, this isn't just about top-down policies.
Right. It's about empowering individuals and communities to take ownership of their built environment. There's a real appetite for this kind of change.
Absolutely. People are ready to embrace sufficiency when they understand the potential benefits. And the final point I want to emphasize is that this is an ongoing journey. We're still in the early stages of exploring what sufficiency can achieve. There's a lot more to learn and discover.
It's an exciting time to be at the forefront of this movement.
It is.
It's reshaping how we think about buildings, cities, and the very nature of community. And before we sign off, is there a thought-provoking question you'd like to leave our listener with? Something to spark their imagination?
You know, building on what we were just discussing about public buildings, I'd ask, what if we looked at all the underutilized spaces in our communities through the lens of sufficiency?
I love that. It's a call to action, but also an invitation to dream a little.
Yeah.
What needs could we meet? What opportunities could we unlock? What would our communities look like if we prioritize making the most of what we already have? Those are questions worth pondering. And who knows, maybe those thoughts will spark a conversation, inspire a project, or even lead to real-world change.
And that's what the deep dive is all about. Thanks for joining us on this exploration of sufficiency in the EU building sector. We hope you found it informative and inspiring.
It's always a pleasure diving deep with you.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.